So just we'll do maybe a quick round of introductions. So my name is Kevin Bender. So I am one of the customer success managers here at Orbus Software. Been with the company for a couple of years now. And joining me today, I have Sean. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon or good morning all. My name is Sean Cleary. I head up our global pre-sales engineering team. So I've been with Orbus for about 10 years. I'll be walking through the session today, but also getting a little hands-on and hopefully showing you a glimpse of the future of some of the process reporting that's coming shortly in Q4.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. So a little bit about what we'll be reviewing today, really. So business process management, and what is business process management? And kind of the easiest way to think about this would be, it's really a method that organizations are using to analyze, optimize, discover, improve, automate their business processes, and really that allows organizations then to really run themselves and make decisions based on those business processes. And Orbus Infinity comes in where it's helping to really kind of streamline and optimize those processes for you.
Great, thank you very much, Kevin. And I suppose one of the key things are when we're starting out with business process management is to identify, well, what do we want to achieve with this? And these are some common scenarios or questions that we encounter with our customers. So being able to identify where we have cross-functional bottlenecks, that may be wasted effort. Maybe we want to be able to view our processes in the context of optimized value streams for stakeholder understanding, but also review how we can improve those, approval. Because processes are how the organization actually runs and how organizations generate their revenue, it's very important to tie those into your digitalization roadmap. And this is where the unique proposition of managing your processes within the context of EA is very powerful as well. But also enabling those conceptual process models to be tied into your business model as well. And then as you start to document those, being able to drive, customer-focused outcomes for your customers in their journeys and their touch points with your organization. So there are common benefits and a natural fit between architecture and process management. So architecture starts to gather and optimize your organizational strategy. So obviously having how the processes actually execute or deliver on that strategy is very important. Being able to tie into the framework of EA to monitor processes effectively is very valuable, and also to help drive decisions, because we're not just looking at processes in the context of tasks, roles, for example, but also your applications that are delivering those, the data that's being consumed or touched on those processes, things like risks, controls as well. And then also being able to identify, well, where are those processes that we have within the organization that we can optimize using technology as well. The other factor is that oftentimes, as we're from looking at it from an architecture standpoint or solutioning standpoint, when you're looking at designing a solution, it's very easy to look at it from an engineering perspective. So how should this solution work without necessarily tying that into the business process? And having the ability to capture processes, and not just processes, but the detailed BPM and 2 flows or the execution flows of this, helps incorporate the work of business analysts into your solutioning process as well. And then when we're looking at this might be familiar to all of you, but as you're looking at the I suppose, Orbus Infinity and our standard model, well, what you'll see here front and center as part of our core model are things like processes, value streams, and also we provide touch points into full support for things like BPM and EA as well, and other factors. And when we're looking at this is maybe looking at a narrower subset of your processes, but it gives you an insight into maybe some of those areas that we can provide the context to your process model. And you don't have to focus on capturing very, very detailed process models to start getting value initially. So you can focus on maybe capturing your level 1, your level 2, your level 3 at this point, and maybe tying that into mapping it to capabilities, value streams, your applications, data that's been used, where is this process being delivered, the organization unit, but also things like maybe risks and controls. And up here in the top right, I've identified some common attributes that we use from a reporting perspective. So description is pretty self-explanatory, having the ownership of the process. How does it impact the organization? Is it revenue generating? Is this a manual process or automated? How complex is it? How often is it reviewed? How mature is it currently? How important is it to the organization as well? So this gives you just a quick snapshot of maybe some of the data and the structure that you can capture initially with your processes, but also we can get right down into the detailed process flows as well. So then the key question is, how do you get started? So let's say you have your own process framework. Well, that's relatively straightforward. If you've documented, that might be in already common exchange formats like Excel, Visio, etc. We can easily import that into the repository. Maybe you're a membership of an industry organization as well that you might want to import that information. And if you can share that with us, we can assist you and ensure that that gets imported and mapped into the repository. You don't have a process framework or would like to get some inspiration to get started? Well, we can provide you with reference models, and reference models aligned to common references like the APQC or the APQC specific industry models as well to get you started, where you can take those and bring those into the tool. So if we're just going to look at this in the platform in a little bit more detail, here you can see the Solutions Hub. So you can see here within the Solutions Hub, we have I've filtered these down by some of those industry reference models so that we can see those within here. So we can see we've got the process classification framework, not just the general one, but also the industry specific ones that you can leverage out of the box. So as you take that and bring that into the platform, well, those will be available within Orbus Infinity. So then as you take those models and then you import them, well, what that will give you is an instant landscape of your process models right across of your processes here. And now what you can do is you can dynamically organize those into different views and perspectives, maybe make your changes or assumptions around those. What I've done for this particular view, I've overlaid some conditional formatting on that. So based on the process complexity, just to dynamically update that or provide some context to these processes. So now at a glance, we can see breakdown of what the organization does. We can edit and update those accordingly. And now what I might do is I might select one of these processes and then drill down and look at it in a bit more detail. So I took that process, a schedule employee training event as I have here. And first of all, before I go into the detailed process flow, we can see the attributes and the characteristics of it. So before we go into this in a bit more detail, you don't have to go to all of the effort of mapping out each process in detail, because as you've got it in an EA tool, well, you can actually just map high-level concepts and details to this to get immediate value. So if I click into the related items to this particular process here, I can see the organization that's associated with, what maybe strategic goals are impacting our delivery, what role is involved in performing this process, what's its parent process, and as I mentioned, the organization units, and obviously we can expand and navigate across all of the relationships and dependencies within here as well. So this gives us a quick way of being able to view, navigate, and link that information. But we, as well as being able to socialize and prioritize that, yes, you can start to socialize the more detailed process models as well. So in this case here, what I'm using is a counterpart for our process. And what a counterpart is in Orbus Infinity, it's highlighting a Visio model or diagram is representing this object or the concept, this process concept in the repository as well. So this means that if I click in here, if I want to see, oh, the details or the detail flow behind this this process, we can easily click in and navigate and view the details associated with it, but also maybe its sub-processes, etc., within your landscape. So as you're probably aware, one of the strengths of Orbus Infinity is that with that integration with Visio, it's taking those standalone Visio diagrams and it's enabling you to create a navigable hierarchy of your processes as well. So what that will mean is if you socialize your processes with other stakeholders, with other views, what they can do is they can they can consume that information, understand the context of these processes as well. If I was to jump in to editing this particular diagram, I've got this diagram open here. You see, as we jump into our process model, we have the Orbus Infinity add-in here. You'll see that on my process diagram, we're not just capturing your standard process flow concepts, so things like actors, roles, tasks, etc. We're also capturing information related to your wider architecture information. So things like risks, applications, projects, requirements, controls. So what this allows you to do is you can do this at any level as well as the detailed process flow, but you can reuse from the repository and link your concepts here. So an example of that is maybe as a solution architect, I'm working documenting the process flows. I can capture touch points of my applications to that process here. I can annotate on the task. Is this a service, a manual and automated task process here? So then that will roll into our reporting, or we can create or document requirements, for example, here, and areas of improvement on our in our models as well. And what this allows us to do is not only also have that project or agile perspective when designing or creating our processes within here as well. This is giving you a quick snapshot of how you can get started. You can take your own process reference models, import them. We can populate reference models for you. You can take those, you can organize them as you might will. You might slice and dice those, showing different perspectives of the data. And then furthermore, you can use that view to prioritize, okay, well, where do we have problems to solve? Where do we have high risk ratings, complexity, where do we have processes that aren't automated, and be able to drill down and document them in a bit more detail. And then the folks that are capturing the processes can benefit from all of the architecture material and the context within the repository, and that further enriches the reporting and the actions that can be taken from there as well. And this also goes beyond different perspectives. So in this, my example here, I just created a view of our processes and being able to group them and maybe heat map them based on things like complexity, risks. But maybe actually I decide I want to create a completely new process perspective. What I could do is I could say, oh, I'm going to create a process, and maybe what I'm going to do is I'm interested in understanding, okay, well, how does this impact our applications? So by doing this and having that view, now we can see here groupings of our business systems to our processes. We can quickly layer in some conditional formatting. So I might just say, okay, well, which one of these processes are high risk? And now we can visualize that and understand that. So basically, this having that information and the processes in the context of architecture allows you to get off to a quicker start, because you have all of the information and organization context details that may be available. This enables teams to be able to slice and dice that information from different perspectives, whether it's from a process lens or an architecture solution lens. And then we can also help support the design and the improvement process here as well, as we're walking through. And then jumping back into my slides as we're walking through, then there's some key tips or tricks to consider before you start this, right? So what is the right level of detail to be able to answer your business questions, right? So as I mentioned, you don't have to be overwhelmed by pulling in or importing right down to your level 4, your level 5 processes and documenting all of the detailed steps. Simply by having an ideal start point to your level 3, maybe prioritizing those areas based on things like complexity, value that they drive to the business. For example, are they revenue generating, the risk ratings? Being able to then link those processes to the other concepts in the repository. So you can easily do that through things like the matrix views, as I mentioned, or update the hierarchies within here. Quickly build out your landscape so that you can easily communicate that perspective to your audience within the organization. And obviously, as we mentioned, you can leverage the supported reference models as well from Orbus, or you can implement your own. The other aspect is, okay, well, being able to use your SharePoint site to communicate and socialize this information, because with that, depending on the level of detail and the areas that you want to communicate, you can easily showcase this to the audience in, I suppose, and engage them where they reside. It also allows them to provide the feedback directly through this this SharePoint page as well. And then also maybe using that view to help organize and your process diagrams when you get to that level in terms of the Visio diagrams, being able to highlight and map those attributes to them, tag those based on business areas, use that to help assist and crowdsource your review process as well. And I realize I've gone through quite a lot of content in that area, because what I wanted to just hone in on then is, as you start to do this at that level 1 to 3 level, these are the types of insights that you can start to generate as well. And what I'll do is I'll just jump into a quick example to walk through, okay, this is some of those reporting and some of the ways that we're pivoting and experimenting with our reporting perspectives as well. So jumping back into my my environment, what I will just quickly drill down into is I've created a SharePoint site here where we can navigate and we can see different perspectives from a process lens. Here I've published out a view of our, as I mentioned, of our diagrams, and you can showcase and navigate through those hierarchies. But one area that I wanted to highlight is sort of our new reporting approach as well. And this, as I'm highlighting this to you, very open to taking feedback on this, but this represents sort of the new direction that we're going with our out-of-the-box reports, being able to summarize and highlight the details, but also looking at changing the layouts and formatting, and also breaking down these reports into smaller bite-sized pieces as well. So being able to maybe publish out excerpts of this report based on different stakeholders' perspectives. So for example, in this particular view, we might have a view of process portfolio, maybe you have a governance perspective, other stakeholders might be interested in a strategy view, or the data completeness tying into the governance lens. In this view here, what we've done is we've rolled up, okay, all of our processes within the organization. How mature are they? What's the breakdown of those manual versus automated processes, or what are partially automated? As you're driving business transformation as well, one of the things that you need to be able to do with your processes is to be able to standardize those. Have we got a standardized process in place so that we can view and understand how do we digitize, how do we start moving towards that target state? So being able to view that. How many of our processes have been optimized here? How many of our processes have been fully documented? So this is looking at and reading, okay, how many of our processes that I have within the repository have we captured that more detailed process flow view here as well? So what it's doing is it's just taking all of the data that we have in the repository and enabling surfacing that here so we can see the progress and the extent of our BPMN program. But then also it's starting to look at other aspects. So our application lifecycle, what applications or what processes are impacted by that? How many of our current processes are supported by applications that are on-prem, SaaS, PaaS as well? And the reason for highlighting this is typically for being able to automate processes, etc. It's a lot easier to automate processes using your SaaS applications than maybe an on-prem or in-house developed application. And then also just looking at the overall review cadence and updates on our processes and what that looks like and what's upcoming over the next year as well. But as we drill down into these areas, what we can see is a detailed view of our processes. And on each lens, we're able to quickly apply filters. So you can see we can filter here by the process hierarchy, owner. Is this automated, for example? Yes, sir. Where do we have our automated processes? Where do we have our manual? processes. What do those look like? Tie-ins to our value streams, our projects, etc. that we might have here, or we can just search at the top based on the parameters that we may have as well. So this allows you to have that interactive view of it, or you can toggle this into more of a high-level view where we can see the details here. So here you're just seeing a report which is showing, okay, which processes are documented, how mature is that process, how automated is it optimized, standardized, our process cost as well, if we're capturing that, how much does it cost us to run that process, when was it reviewed, and then also you're starting to see how some of the other governance pieces come to play as well. What controls need to be implemented as part of this process as well. How complex is it? How many relationships, dependencies does this have in our wider audience as well? And then if we look into the details, I suppose this is the excerpt here showing, okay, if we drill down into one process in a bit more detail, well, what information can we see here? So we can see how many capabilities it supports. And then we can see, and this is maybe some of these concepts might change. We're planning on releasing this dashboard in the next quarter, but really what we're trying to communicate here is at the moment we've directly mapped 3 applications that might be supporting or enabling this process, but in its wider ecosystem or within that reference, there might be 8 applications that are leveraging it, that are supporting it as well. So what this is showing is, hey, we've got three applications that are directly mapped or supporting this, but we've got an additional 8 applications in the broader ecosystem that are enabling it. Have we assigned roles to this particular process? Who have we got those RACI roles? Who's responsible, accountable, informed around our processes? How many locations? Is there any projects that are impacting or changing this process? How many tasks are showing an indication of how complex or how detailed this process is documented? The defined controls associated with it, and similar concept to what I was speaking about with the applications. We can see the controls that are tied in or supporting here, or also in the broader ecosystem. And similarly from the risk lens as well. And then we can simply filter or view what that looks like here in the right-hand side and see the details behind it. And then over on the left-hand side, what we're seeing is just those scores and those attributes that we were talking about, the automation status, the complexity, the cost, and the next review date, and highlighting, hey, have we fully documented this? Have we defined controls associated with this as well? So, and then what this is showing is a slightly different perspective. So that previous page was just looking at one application in a bit more detail, but here we're showing a little bit more of that risk lens that's tied in here as well. So these are documented risks that we've tied in. So we can see our process down here, and we can see the repeating specific risks that associated with that. And then also, as we click into that, we can also see touch points into other areas as well. So we can see the risks that are documented, is there critical data tied in? So now you can also see in our third column on the right-hand side, the data that's tied in here. Is it personally identifiable? its information security classification. Is it critical, non-critical? And then this is rolled up and summarized here. Similarly, from an application perspective, what applications are supporting it, what's their current status, deployment model within here, and then also breakdown of things like the tasks, the task types, what are your business rules, scripts, user details that are captured here, as well as the controls. So you can start to see how the various levels of information that you capture can be visualized or communicated to a broader audience. And that's not necessarily dependent just on capturing the detail flows, but by having this in the architecture context, we can easily map into our existing data glossary, our existing application portfolio, and then as that information gets updated, well, then that ties into our process lens here, and obviously vice versa as well. On these as well, I suppose when I was looking at more of the detailed view, but then this is a little bit more of a, I suppose, of the more attractive view as well. So what we are looking at is actually the breakdown of our risks, and then scored based on the risk impact, the likelihood, being able to drill into that, being able to filter here based on our processes and our process hierarchy directly from that reference model that we were mentioning, the deployment impact distribution. So, okay, well, surprisingly, not that many risks are actually tied to our on-prem products. We've got maybe some additional risks or perspectives within here. Where do we have challenges or risks against our internal or maybe our secret classifications, data criticality perspectives, and then the tasks types breakdown as well, and then being able to filter on each level, or also drill down into and toggle this into the more detailed perspective as well within here. Finally, what you can see is the ability to understand how our value stream and our capability landscape will be impacted based on the processes that support them. So these are directly mapped here. We can filter this based on, hey, where do we have automated processes? Tie that in here against our capability landscape or value stream perspective. What projects are in flight that are impacting these, and filter by that, and also understand the processes themselves, and be able to search and drill down into those or apply any of the other filters, like is this documented or not, the roles, process owners, hierarchy, etc. as well. And then obviously, as you can see here, I can quickly tab between a capability perspective or a value stream perspective based on your preference. And finally, I suppose as we tie in here, we can see for this particular view or report the completion status as well. So this logic sustains itself, so we can see here where we have our process hierarchies, our ownership, our attribute completeness, our relationship completeness within here, or we can search for show only attributes, show only relationships, just to understand that lens and perspective. And obviously, if you've got the permissions, you can go straight into the repository and edit or update those characteristics as well from here. So that was a quick snapshot of, I suppose, the future sort of reporting format and layout. This report is actually going to be made available in the next release in Q4. So it also, as I mentioned before, symbolizes just a change in our reporting formats, layouts. There might be some slight changes or tweaks to this before we make this available. But that was just to give you a flavor of some of the reporting outcomes that you can get to as well. As I was going through, I see there is a question in the chat. Okay. So the first question, I think, was the report views. Awesome. When is this available? So that will be, this is giving you a flavor that will be available next quarter. There may be some changes to this, but this type of format and layout is also intended to actually be replicated across all of our existing formats as well, and other scenarios. I'm happy to share some information from the product team on that area as well.
Sean, we've got a couple other questions if you want to go through a few now.
Sure. I can't quite see them, so maybe I'll let you shout them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the questions was, we've already got some of our processes inside of Orbus Infinity, but we're keen to sort of get the gaps filled. So they've mostly got level 3s, but would need help to sort of build out their level 1 and level 2 views. Is this possible to align what we have currently to a more dynamic view, so sort of similar to what we've seen now?
Yes, correct. So what you can do is you can use different engagement strategies. So obviously you can use this in here, some of these views that I mentioned earlier. So this is looking at the landscape view, but perhaps different views that you could create here to quickly create the mappings. You might decide to create a traceability view or a matrix where you would pull in your processes and just map those dependencies as well. Also, what we can also provide, or oh, sorry, I didn't save that one. What I'd also recommend as part of that approach is you could actually bring in your level 1s, a reference model into another area in the repository, so separate from that, and view that in that context and decide, actually, what would I like to reuse into my production area as well. So that's also a very effective way of maybe creating a separation area within the repository, making the changes, making mapping, seeing what it looks like, and then deciding to migrate or copy those over into your production area as well, to give you a little bit of flexibility there. Another mechanism could also be using that and creating a custom intake form. So here I've got, in my instance, I've created a project intake form or architecture view, but what you could also do is highlight an intake form where you could propose mappings of processes as well to close that gap.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Just a couple other questions here. One that's more focused on sort of training. So if there's any training available from Orbus in terms of for process owners or management practitioners to sort of optimally use the software.
Yes. So as I suppose the training or the processes, there's a couple of different levels. So as you may be aware, we're expanding the knowledge base within Orbus Infinity in the community so that you can have engagement and other access training materials through there. but also we have an accelerator training workshop as well that's focused on these key areas. So one of those would actually be the process area. So what that would encompass of is hands-on workshop with a professional services consultant from Orbus, where we'd work with you in your repository, lead a workshop in terms of setting up or doing some of this editing, configuring, and working that end-to-end process through. So not only would you have training completed, but you should also have some deliverables and action and data updated, made available to the team as an output as well. So that would include both hands-on training and experience, and also quick start deliverables to get the team off and running as well.
Excellent, thank you, Sean. Do you want to answer a couple more? Was there a few more items you wanted to go through, and then we can take a few more questions after?
I suppose the only item I had left on a high level is to touch on, okay, now that we have this information in the repository and we've captured the process as well, what are the potential directions that we can go to from a process lens? So, and as you capture those processes and maybe your value streams in the tool, right, where we've been talking about maybe tie that into your architecture, your solutioning perspective, and the digitalization program. But the first thing that we have is by having that landscape and that detail, going back to maybe the question about, okay, we've got some of our processes, but we don't necessarily have the full landscape or the full end-to-end. Maybe identifying those where you have those gaps and where we might want to optimize or improve those processes. Maybe taking those value streams, those critical processes as well, and being able to deliver some customer journey mapping, and then also even tying in touch points into from a digitalization perspective, right? How can technology enable this, or how can the process be improved? And then also, as you can see, we can start mapping our risks and controls. So this also, and our data and our sensitive data. So now we can start looking at this from a risk and resiliency perspective as well, right? In an operational context, because what data is being used by the processes, what its categorization, its business glossary, what controls do we need to have in place, what risks have we captured, and then if an incident or we need to mitigate a risk, well, we can easily see not just the applications, if that risk impacts an application, but the tasks, the processes, and the roles that are impacted as well and need to be considered. So it just gives you some flavor of, once you have that data, where you can also drive to as well. Okay, I'll let you ask a few more questions, Kevin.
Awesome, thanks. Couple questions. The meta model for the reports, that's based off of the core EA meta model, is that correct?
That would be correct. It would be the core EA meta model would be the base for the reports.
Perfect. Question around process diagrams. So you annotated a process diagram with requirements and other objects. Are the objects available for annotation customizable? For instance, can you annotate capabilities within a process flow?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go here, this is just using our standard template where we've captured things like controls, risks, etc. But you could also add capabilities within here as well. Also, the other thing is that you could also maybe have slightly different perspectives or templates that you might want to update. So you could actually do maybe more of a capability on a page perspective and capture not just the detail flow, but you could just say, okay, for this particular capability, these are the processes, applications, technologies, roles that support it as well. So you could do a slightly more simple view, or you could also simply have a update this so that you can reuse capabilities as touch points to your processes here as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. I've got another question. What are the typical use cases for utilizing the BPM capability? And can you send me a link or document that summarizes? So I can certainly follow up with that, but maybe you can touch on some of the typical use cases for this, for utilizing this capability?
Sure. So I suppose, first of all, some of the use cases, there's a broad set of use cases that you can touch on. So if we're going back and just referring to my high-level structure, so let's say just capturing our process landscapes. First of all, what processes symbolize is how we operationalize things in the architecture realm, things like our capabilities, how we actually deliver revenue to the organization. So first of all, being able to identify where those lie. Second of all, identify how complex or how we can digitize those processes, and then the impacts of that. Then taking also tying in things like the risk perspective as well, the data that's consumed by that. Then taking that down another level, well, now we can actually socialize and communicate the more detailed process flows as well. So the step-by-step process. So that also enables not just an understanding of the processes the organization has, but maybe communicating things like standard operating procedures, being able to understand how processes link together or steps, being able to pull out of the tool responsibilities for different roles, actors within the organization, and then also being able to use those processes within your solutioning lens as well, so that when you are engineering a new architecture solution or solution, that actually it aligns to the business process and needs as well. And also being able to optimize those processes and identify how we can reduce risk, digitize and automate those, and then also prioritize those areas as well. Sorry, that was quite a few different ones, but I can share like a little bit more of a detail as a follow-up to this. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sean. Just thinking, sort of another broader question around processes. So, how would you recommend that we sort of ensure that our processes are kept up to date?
Sure. So you see here that we actually looked at this and I suppose having a review status of those processes as well. So what would recommend is that you would have a process owner for that, who would be responsible for that process, but also maybe not necessarily be a business analyst or somebody within the tool, but has knowledge of that process within the organization. So having that attestation or review process in place, but then it isn't just about having that attestation or review process, it's also tying into actually making this socializing that, because if you socialize the processes and enable the business to be able to engage with those, well, then that naturally also helps keeping those up to date, because stakeholders will want to refer to that as in terms of validating their understanding of the process. It provides a great base point or start point for project or improvement initiatives as well, and being able to have that have that dialogue. And then that also then helps with the engagement with the team members who are documenting, capturing those processes as well. So I would say, having process owners and a attestation process in place for a frequent review cycle. B, making sure that they're available and consumable, can be engaged with the wider business where they can access it, and then also actually use it as part of their conversations and improvement discussions as well.
Great, thank you, Sean. A couple more questions here. One was around adding process owner, process manager, process analyst attributes in an object. So she mentioned in complying with BPM CBOC version 4.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
so that is possible.
Yes, it is. So you can, as we talked about, the ownership fields, etc., are available as standard, but also when you create a new ownership field, what you can also do is pull those in from your AD as well. So you can import those and allocate those ownerships fields that are available out of the box, but you can also add additional ones should you wish as well.
Excellent. I think we touched on it, but some examples of APQC process levels and capability levels. I think you were just on the APQC there a second ago.
Sure. So first of all, here these are available from our Solutions Hub. So these are the industry specific ones. So you could just take those, import those into the repository, and then there's those APQC levels are actually that process hierarchy or landscape that I was referring to as we're walking through the session as well. So whether I had socialized within here, I had this is starting out maybe at the high level. Oh, let me drill in here. That was a customer journey map. This is a high level APQC view. As we select the process within here, what we can do is we can see its details, its links to other elements within the repository. And then as we click on that, we can easily just expand and navigate through that hierarchy. So this is actually tying in or drilling down directly through my diagrams, and actually this is drilling down into the original my diagram that I was working in within the Visio instance that we were speaking about earlier as well. So you have the ability to have that lens or perspective, or as I was speaking to in here, when I created my process complexity view, this was also leveraging that APQC perspective as well. So you can use the general one or the industry specific one, or you can import those as we were speaking to and customize and align to your organization. Another fact that is another approach with that is in the repository, I mentioned that you've got things like different workspaces, for example. So what that also means is that you could actually take the APQC, bring that in, use it, leverage it, but then also take that and customize it so you can actually see how you've decided to differentiate yourself from the out-of-the-box APQC model as well.
Excellent, thank you. I think we've got time for probably one more question. There was one around the new capabilities that you've shared today around the views and things like that. Will they function within MetaMall extensions, and will these be realized in any of the modeling or reports?
Sure. So all of the views that I've mentioned that are created here, like the landscape views, etc., they will all function with MetaModel extensions, absolutely. Just touching on the actual, this sample report here, this sample report would be based on the APQs, or sorry, not the core EA meta model. So all of the dynamic views and capabilities that I touched on within the session, they would all function with any meta model extensions. This particular view is aligned to the core EA out of the box meta model.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we're coming to the end of our time. If I've got any questions that are outstanding and a couple of action points, I'll be sure to follow up. Just as a reminder, everyone will get a recording of the session today. So I just want to say, thank you once again from myself and Sean for joining today and having either a review or maybe a first look at our business process management capabilities. Thank you very much. And as I said, I'll be in touch and you should receive a recording of this following today. Sean, anything else from you?
No, thank you. Thank you very much, all. I appreciate the time, and also feel free to reach out to us if you've got any questions or follow-up questions in addition to the ones we had today. Thank you.
Great.
Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.